So to incorporate text, you don't need to just like write a word and have that word just chilling, somewhere um, in your collage. I mean, you could. I'd like you to make it diegetic so that it's actually part of the image. Diegesis means of the world or in the world. It's an old Greek term. Okay, so it needs to look like it's actually part of your collage and not just like hanging out. Not like some goofy signature. So what I don't want, is like I don't want something like this. Oh, we're not gonna let me write up there. Oh, because I'm writing on that thing. Like word. I don't want that. Okay, or anything like that at all. What I would like you to do is something more along the lines of finding like a letter form. You can drop a text box, a character box. It's just T is your hotkey. You can kind of come through here and find some fonts that you like. Oh, look, emojis. Emojis don't count as text, by the way. So just find a font form that you like, just the shape of the letters or something. Something you can do something with that's kind of interesting. You don't need. It doesn't need to be like literal. You don't need to. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. What I'm going to do is treat a letter form. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I'm going to treat a letter form as just a shape. Okay. So here I have this letter form. There are different things I can do with this letter form, just like anything else. I can scale it, skew it. I can really tweak it, make it look very different than what it is. I can warp it, which gives me kind of a couple of options for how to warp it. I can bulge it out, which gives me like a nest or like a grid over it, and I can pull those points. The wave. So there's quite a bit you can do to distort that letter form and make it just look like anything else, or or nothing else, really. Just like a shape. So maybe, well, I already don't like what I've done to it, so let's try this again. All right. So don't look at it as a letter. Look at it as just a shape. Let's go with. I want to do this. Like maybe it's part of a texture, or maybe standing on it. I think what we're going to do is skew it here quite a bit and make it look. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm just playing. So I'm going to put it here, but then you can add an image mask to it. I'm just adding a white image mask to it. So it lets everything through, and then I can paint black on that image mask to then hide certain parts of it. So if I want it to appear like it's behind, the boys here, then I can either paint it out very carefully, come through and paint on the mask like this to sort of hide it. But you run the risk of kind of messing that up, and that can be a little tedious. Or what you could do is come down to one of those image masks. Let's go with this one first. Add mask to selection. Come back up. Make sure you have that layer mode selected. And then that only lets you paint inside of it. So this is an instance where you need to invert your selection. So it selects everything outside of it and lets me paint on the outside. Well, never mind. Sorry. I do want to paint only on the inside. So I paint on the inside to hide the rest of the letter, which now makes it looks like it goes behind him now. So it's sort of like crooked around there. I want to do the same for her. So women in car. Come over here. Add mask to selection. Come back up to that layer mask and paint that part out. And there you go. Other things you could do, like we could kind of paint part of the bird out, or use this bird's layer mask. Let's go try this one. Yeah. Add mask to selection. Oops. Add mask to selection. Come back up here, grab my brush, and this is where you would kind of maybe paint a little softly with it. Maybe up here is where it comes across, but down here, I want the hardest brush you can use to get the hardest edge you can to keep it really clean. Just to make it look like it's kind of coming over the edge of that bird a little. So that just makes the text now look like it's part of my image, right? Other things you could do, let's see. I don't think we can just make it, we should be able to just make it an object. Yeah, rasterize type layer. So now it becomes an actual shape of pixels instead of a text object that you could edit again. Then what you can do here is we already have a mask set up for it. If you wanted to, you could grab it, the whole thing. So since it's by itself, I would use my magic wand and just grab the white layer, right? Everything else, like if you hide everything else, the M exists by itself on a transparent layer. You can see that down here on your layers. So use your magic wand tool, select the white, so it selects everything, and then around the edges, and then invert that. And then come back over here, grab your black brush, and maybe not do that. Hold on. God, I keep wanting to invert my selections when I don't need to. I don't know why I'm doing this. So make sure you do have everything else selected, and then paint that black, and now you've got a layer mask that you can, like a full layer mask for that layer. Does that make sense to everybody? Kind of what I did there. So it's gonna work here. So now my layer mask looks like this for the M. So the only thing that you can see through it is the actual letter form, the white part. What this will let me do is it gives me a layer selection to select, and I can add things underneath it for texture, like we did with the fish face here, and what I did with the fish down here, right? That let me put texture behind the birds, another image behind the birds. I could do the same thing with the M now. So I could grab another one of my images, say, I want something architectural, like this one, right? Copy this whole thing over, dump it in here. It's probably going to be pretty big. Let's scale it down a little bit. I'll mess with it here in a second. Put it there, but now come down, add my mask to selection, then select that building layer, make a selection, and now you can see I have that texture underneath there. And then I can start playing with my my different blending methods to get different textures under there. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Kind of see what I did there? So that's one way that you can use letter forms, right? Text objects to get different shapes that are kind of recognizable, incorporate them into your collage without just dropping a text object and writing a word or a phrase. I'm not saying you can't, but if you do that, you need to make it part of the image. It needs to look like there's a reason for it to be there. Like part of collage is that surreal nature, okay, of it kind of trying to represent an image, but then everything being all weird and sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Well, surreal, but there's another word, I can't think of it. Abnormal. If you're doing a collage that is all like texture and movement and shape, like some of the examples we looked at, then of course your treatment's gonna be a little different. But if you remember from what was it, the composition? Is it the composition one? Nope, not the composition one. Principles of 2D design. Any previews? Nope. Yeah, there we go. So this is an example of collage, right? This is an example of collage without using really anything that's recognizable. There's no faces, it's just paper that's cut up into shapes and forms. So if you're building a collage like this, which you totally can, then your treatment of text is going to be a little different. You know, there are some text-like shapes in here, a lot of shapes that look like S's or E's or N's or R's, but then there's actually some words like mellow that is just hanging out. So if you're doing something like this, then you're going to treat it a little differently. But if you're doing something a little bit more like what I've been building in my examples, then it's going to make sense to have it seem like it's part of the world. One way that you can do that, and actually, you know, you want to make sure that you keep these as their own layer here. One way you can do that is, and I kind of showed you a way earlier, but you know, find your letter forms. So like, well, find, you know, what do you want to say? I have no idea. Maybe, well, this is just an example, so we'll go a thing. I would say thing. Say thing. You have lots of different text options. There are more. If you click on this little folder icon, it pops out more of a detailed settings menu. You have size. You have line height. So the distance, you know, if you have multiple lines, the distance between the two lines. Generally, your line height is going to be a little bit bigger than what your font size is, just to give you a lot of space between the lines. You know, what's the distance between my letters? I don't know why none of this is. Why is it not changing? It's very weird. It should be changing. I don't know why it's not. There we go. So if you want to move your letters closer together, so maybe I want them to look like they belong together, like they're a thing that's all attached. Like this, you can do that. And then I would warp them. Maybe. Warp. Where's my warp menu? My warp menu is like not popping up for some reason. Oh, it's up here, sorry. You know, you could make it look like a flag, so it waves, right? And then maybe take that and rotate it a little bit. It's coming off her back. You could rasterize the layer or do just a layer mask straight on top of this. To rasterize, again, you're going to go to Type, Rasterize Type Layer. So it saves it. You can put a blank image mask on top of it. Come in and use that brush again. And just, you know, by sticking it on her like this, it doesn't actually look like it's part of her. It just looks like it's sitting on top of her. So you got to find a way to make it kind of distorting that contour a little bit helps to make it seem like it's attached. So you can do things like that, right? It's so recognizable as text, but it's also, you know, you can kind of see it as an object. So play around with it that way. To get geometric shapes, it's a couple different ways. There is a shape tool, right down here. Many different shapes. These are like vector objects, almost in a way. I don't want to draw on there. Let me get a new layer here. Let's put this down in text. All right. Go ahead and delete that one. All right, so here's a triangle. If I hit, so if I drop a triangle, but I want, say, like a rectangle or a hexagon or something, just come up to your options bar, change the number of sides to however many you want, then draw another one, and you'll get it. You'll get the one you want. You can edit. I thought you could. Polygon. Where do my Polygon edit tools go? Nope. Nope. Let me find it really quick. Polygon. Should hide polygons. Alright, I forgot where it was. When you go to draw a rectangle, or I'm sorry, a different shape, when you select the object, or select the tool, there's a bunch of options up here to change. There is a way to change them afterwards, though. I just don't remember where it is. Paths? Nope. Cancel. I think it would be like a right-click feature. Define custom shape. Nope. Selection, new guides, raster layer, free. When you draw a shape, they're not technically rasterized objects. They are special objects. You can tell that in the layers because they'll have this this little like box with the squares. You kind of see that little icon there. That means they're a smart object. Oh, second, let me do something. Yep. So you're gonna give me a mouse over? No, just layer thumbnail. Okay. It's really not helpful. All right, I'm gonna have to Google.